He works from his house anyways. These are the same people that championed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, knowing full well that they wouldn't have to actually fight in the wars. Now they're demanding that the economy reopen, downplaying the coronavirus because they know that they're not going to be the ones to catch the disease and die. Hello everyone, it's Good Friday today. I probably won't be making any videos this weekend, so I'm going to go ahead and wish everyone a happy Easter. Stay safe out there with everything that's going on right now. Anyways, I've got a two-part video for you today. The first part, I'm going to be calling out all of these keyboard coronavirus warriors. And then for the second part, I'm going to be talking about Mexican interference in the US election. To begin the first topic, I wanted to talk about when I first started paying attention to politics, back when I was in high school. This was back when George W. Bush was president of the United States. It was during this period of time that the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, two wars that would end up being forever wars, which our country is still fighting today. Since that period of time, the United States has poured trillions of dollars into these wars. Had the United States not invaded these countries, I would expect our country to be in a very different reality than it finds itself right now. Because I opposed those wars, around that period of time, I viewed myself as a leftist. Now, I've always been socially conservative. I've always been opposed to identity politics. I've always been opposed to immigration. But back during that time, being a leftist, being a Democrat, didn't mean that you were some radical when it came to immigration and identity politics. In fact, I remember before Obama was president, when he was campaigning, one of his campaign promises was stricter enforcement of immigration laws. As time has gone on, the left in this country has moved further and further to the left, and specifically in regards to things like identity politics and immigration. When Donald Trump's political campaign became very popular, it drew my interest towards right-wing politics. Finally, there was a candidate running that wasn't a complete neoliberal shill. Now, Donald Trump's been far from perfect as president. I still think he is a neoliberal president. But he's much less neoliberal than any other president we've had in a long time. But anyways, this personal political reversal I've experienced has put me in a weird position. There's all of these conservative pundits and commentators that I now find myself favorably disposed to because they're now advocates of Donald Trump. But to a large degree, these are the same people that trumpeted the disastrous wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I specifically remember how ardent people like Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly were at defending the war. Bill O'Reilly on Fox News used to occupy the same time slot that Tucker Carlson does now. I believe when I was growing up, his talk show was the most popular political show in the entire country. Fox News ended up firing his ass after a sexual harassment lawsuit. I don't remember the details of it, just that it involved some sort of sex act involving a falafel. Anyways, anyone who thought that these wars were bad ideas, that they would end badly, that they'd become forever war quagmires, were labeled as unpatriotic. Because France didn't agree to go along with these stupid crusades, people like Sean Hannity demanded that things like French fries be referred to as freedom fries from now on. Of course, the joke was on them because people in France don't generally eat French fries. It's primarily people in the United States that eat this greasy junk food. Now, the people who opposed these wars had their own euphemisms for the people who supported them. People like Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly were armchair generals. They were people who were very eager to advocate for warfare, but when it came to signing up for military service, they were largely absent. Another popular term was keyboard warrior. There were an awful lot of people willing to go online and post articles defending the wars, but these same journalists were not willing to sign up or join the military and actually fight the wars. The reason I bring this up is it seems like a lot of these keyboard warriors, these conservative pundits who served as armchair generals defending the Iraq and Afghanistan war, seem to be repeating the same thing during the coronavirus crisis. Yesterday on Sean Hannity's radio show, Bill O'Reilly made a guest appearance. And during that guest appearance, he indicated that everyone was overreacting to the coronavirus, given the fact that all of the people who were dying of the disease were on their last legs anyway. Now, Bill O'Reilly is someone who works from his house. He doesn't work for Fox News anymore, they fired him. He makes YouTube videos from his house. He calls into political shows and does guest appearances. Social distancing for Bill O'Reilly just means doing the same thing he does day in and day out. So Bill O'Reilly is the perfect example of the coronavirus equivalent of an armchair general. He can downplay the coronavirus and demand that the economy reopen because he literally stands zero risk of catching the disease. The same thing is true of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro works out of his own studio, which for all I know is probably a room in his house. Social isolation for Ben Shapiro just means that he doesn't get to eat out at restaurants. He has to get his food to go. But otherwise, it's the same old thing. When Ben Shapiro spurgs out and demands that the economy reopen, calls Dr. Fauci a liar, or demands that some timetable be put into place, it's because he has nothing to worry about. He's not going to catch the virus. He works from his house anyways. These are the same people that championed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, knowing full well that they wouldn't have to actually fight in the wars. Now they're demanding that the economy reopen, downplaying the coronavirus because they know that they're not going to be the ones to catch the disease and die. Now, the medical experts leading the United States response to the coronavirus estimate that around 60,000 Americans will die of the disease. And that's largely thanks to all of the social distancing and social isolation that the government has recommended. The estimates of how many Americans would die if these measures were not taken was 2 million Americans. So we're talking casualties that would amount to basically a third of the casualties that were experienced during the Holocaust. The people like Bill O'Reilly and Ben Shapiro, I guess, just don't care about these 2 million people. They're just people on their last legs, right? Well, how many Americans would fall into the category of being on their last legs? Last time I checked, about half of all Americans have diabetes. And guess what? Diabetes is a risk factor for dying of coronavirus. What about drug addiction? The United States has one of the highest risks of drug addiction in the world. We're still in the midst of an opioid crisis. So I suppose all of those people are going to be on their last legs as well. And then what about the number of elderly people in the United States? We have a population that is heavily tilted towards the elderly. The birth rates in this country have been very low for quite a long time now. The reasons for that are complicated, but I think probably chief amongst them is the sheer amount of debt that's required just to be an average worker in the US economy. It's led people to not have children or to delay it for a long time. As a consequence of this, we have much more older people than younger people in this country. But I guess all of those people are just on their last legs, right? We might as well just let them all die, according to Bill O'Reilly. And Bill O'Reilly's statement isn't even totally true. It's not just elderly and sick people who die of the coronavirus. Although they're most at risk, young people die from the disease as well. If our hospitals are completely overwhelmed and we don't have enough ventilators, which is already happening, then our healthcare system won't be in a position to protect even the younger people. Because that's what happens a lot of times with the coronavirus. People get afflicted and they have problems breathing. If the person is elderly or has an underlying condition, even with a ventilator, that person is likely to die. If it's a younger person, given the ventilator and enough time, they can probably recover. But if there's no ventilator, if the hospital is just completely overwhelmed, it doesn't have the staff, it doesn't have the equipment, then the younger person dies. But Ben Shapiro's stock portfolio needs a boost, so let's just reopen the economy, right? These people are completely despicable. Anyways, moving on to the next thing I wanted to talk about, the government of Mexico is interfering in U.S. elections. It's been reported that Mexican government officials have been reaching out to both Mexican Americans and illegal immigrant Mexican nationals living in the United States and urging them to complete U.S. Census paperwork. The U.S. Census is hugely important. The data that it gathers is used to apportion resources as well as to determine what electoral representation different regions of the country receive. A higher population in the census means more representatives in Congress. Therefore, I can't think of a more egregious example than this as to a foreign government interfering in U.S. elections. Why is the Mexican government telling people living in the United States what they should do with regards to the U.S. Census? This interference is likely to be much more consequential than anything that Russia ever did. Mexico is a much bigger threat to the United States than Russia will ever be. Just look at how much drugs are poured into the United States every day from Mexico. 96% of the legal drugs consumed in the United States come through the country of Mexico. The government of Mexico is entirely corrupt, and there is no rule of law there. When it comes to serious violent crimes, the conviction rate is only 4%. 96% of the criminals who commit violent crimes in Mexico receive absolute impunity for the violence that they inflict on other Mexican citizens. Therefore, any attempt by Mexican officials to manipulate the results of the U.S. Census to interfere in our elections should be met with alarm. This is something that should be reported by the mainstream media. It's something that we should all take very seriously, especially given how seriously everyone took the stupid Russian troll farm that paid $10,000 for Facebook ads in the 2016 election. But that's not the only thing that's concerning about these news reports. It's clear that the Mexican government doesn't view its citizens who come to the United States as immigrants. It views them as Mexican nationals living in a foreign country. After all, after leaving Mexico, if these people become citizens of the United States, you would expect the Mexican government to no longer hold any sway over them. There's no reason the Mexican government should be telling these people what to do if they're no longer citizens of Mexico. The expectation by the Mexican government is that these Mexicans living in the United States should be primarily loyal to Mexico, not the United States. Now, I don't want to be overly broad or stereotypical. I'm sure there are many people who come from Mexico to the United States who have no interest in being Mexican anymore. They want to become Americans, they want to assimilate, they want to pursue the American dream, and that's great. But based on my own subjective experience dealing with Mexican Americans, I would say there's also a large contingent of them that have no interest in being United States citizens. They identify themselves with Mexico more than the United States. They don't learn English. They put Mexican flags on their cars. They listen to Mexican music. Many of them intend to return to Mexico after a period of time working in the United States and saving money. Many of the people in this contingent are so uninterested in becoming actual U.S. citizens that they don't even bother to comply with U.S. immigration law at all. Mexico is their home country, and the United States is just a place for them to do whatever they want and make money. If Mexican Americans are perfectly assimilated into the United States, why is it that whenever I go to any of the local Mexican restaurants, and obviously I'm talking about when restaurants were open before the coronavirus, But why is it that I'd find them to be completely filled with Hispanic patrons? But then when I would go to the local Italian restaurant, the local Jewish deli, the local Chinese restaurant, none of these Hispanic patrons were to be found. Because honestly, to me, Hispanic immigration into the United States does not seem like a melting pot. Instead, it seems like two entirely separate countries are existing, overlapping on top of each other in the same territory. Sure, these people are all a part of the same economy that I am, but they're not a part of the same country. They don't want to be. They're not interested in that. But I guess the status quo will just keep continuing. We'll keep getting flooded by immigrants, flooded by drugs, and the Mexican government will continue to manipulate election outcomes in the United States. But anyways, that's all I've got to say. Once again, have a happy Easter and stay safe out there. If you like this video and you're not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe.